Good morning, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome back to Law and Crime. This is where we cover some of the most interesting live trials across the country today. Now, before we begin, I want to provide a very special welcome to all of our listeners. That's right, all of our listeners on Sirius XM Radio. We're so happy that you're joining us. I hope you hear me. Do you hear me? I hope so, because we have a very busy day today. We are live today in multiple trials across the country. Let's get started on where we're at. At around 10:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are going to continue our live coverage of the sentencing hearing, in the Gloria Williams case. Williams posed as a nurse. She stole a baby from a hospital and raised that girl as her own until this was discovered last year. That baby, who was born Kamaya Mobley, is now a 20-year-old woman. This is an amazing story. Williams pled guilty to 2 charges in connection with this. She pled guilty to kidnapping and interference with custody. These are both felonies. Now, today is the question, what punishment should she face? Williams is asking for the court to say anywhere between 0 to 22 years in prison on the kidnapping charge and 0 to 5 years on the interference charge. You heard me correct. There is no minimum mandatory sentence. She may not go to prison after doing all this, and that's what we're going to have to see later on today. Yesterday, for anybody that was following it, Shanara Mobley, this is Kamaya's biological mother. She took the stand and she provided extremely emotional and compelling testimony. Imagine having your baby taken from you for 20 years. Now, if you want to have an idea of what she said, when pressed, what do you think is an appropriate sentence for Miss Williams? Mobley said, death. Obviously, that's not on the table, but you can get an idea of where she's coming from. We believe that Williams herself, the defendant, will take the stand today. Again, we believe the coverage will begin at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You don't want to miss it. We'll go right to it when it's live. Our next case, and this is another, again, we have a million cases that we're covering here today. Our next one is one that we've actually covered before. It's an update in it. It's the George Birch case out of Wisconsin. A lot of you will remember this one. We're expecting live coverage in this at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. George Birch was on trial for the 2016 murder of Nicole Vanderheiden. Prosecutors said Birch violently beat, sexually assaulted, and strangled Vanderheiden with a cord. Now, this case was unique in that despite an overwhelming amount of evidence against Birch, his team put him on the stand, maintained his innocence, and even pointed the finger at Nicole's boyfriend, Douglas Dietrich, saying that he was the killer. Well, the jury didn't buy any of that, and they found him guilty of her murder. So today, beginning today, is the sentencing hearing. Now, his conviction automatically triggers a life sentence, but the question for the judge is, will Mr. Birch be granted the possibility of parole or not? Now, the family and friends of Nicole do not want that possibility of parole. We are going to cover that case later today. You do not want to miss that one as well. I want to give an update as well as about another case that we're going to continue next week, the Sean Great case out of Ohio, this accused serial killer. He's on charge for a multitude of different crimes. He faced 23 different charges, including the murders of 2 women and the kidnapping and rape of a third. Earlier this week, he pled guilty. That's right, he pled guilty in court to 15 of the 23 charges. And we have a breakdown on Law and Crime with a bunch of articles explaining what that means for this man. We are going to continue our coverage on Monday. The court is on recess until that time. Now, the last case that we're not going to be covering here on the network, but you can go to lawandcrime.com to follow, is not a criminal case. It is a civil case. It's the David Copperfield case out of Las Vegas. The famed magician as well as the MGM Grand are on trial. They're being sued by an audience participant who got injured, who allegedly got injured during one of these tricks. And now he is suing David Copperfield and the MGM Grand for negligence. You can go to lawandcrime.com to follow that one. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is just the appetizer, because our main focus, the trial that we've been focusing on every day, is the William Riley Gaul case out of Tennessee. We are going to be live in that case. You don't want to miss this one either. We expect live coverage at around 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. William Riley Gaul, a former Maryville College football player, allegedly stalked and killed his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker, who was a high school cheerleader at the time of her death. It is alleged that Gaul fired 2 shots through Walker's bedroom wall while she slept, and one of those shots struck her right in the head, killing her immediately. Gaul is on trial for numerous crimes, including first-degree murder, stalking, theft, reckless endangerment, employing a firearm, and killing during aggravated child abuse. He has already pled guilty to reckless endangerment for firing a weapon into a house. That carries with it a minimum of 3 to a maximum of 15 years in prison. That's already on the table. Now, yesterday was very interesting. We saw here on Law and Crime the secret recordings from his friends. They captured him on video talking about what happened, talking about what they should say to police. We're going to talk about this case. We have so much to analyze, but I want to really preview this case properly. We have a special report about the opening statements in this case that will provide some context about where we are and where we're going. This is the William Riley Gaul case.
During opening statements, prosecutors said victim Emma Walker was asleep at night when a bullet fired from outside her house entered her bedroom, struck her head, and killed her. Her family found the body when she didn't wake up in the morning.
And let us figure out who would do this. And every person is going to say, Riley Gaul. Riley Gaul. And so their immediate attention turns to Riley Gaul.
Walker and the defendant had dated. Prosecutors say she started to turn him down, so he staged a bizarre kidnapping ploy to reclaim her attention. Later, they say he dressed in black, walked around her neighborhood to scare her, hoping the strange stunt would allow him to swoop in and rescue her. The night of Emma Walker's death, text messages showed the defendant was pleading.
And he's saying things like, in his text, Emma, I'm begging. That's 12:09:39. I'm begging. 12:03:47. Please, God, answer. 12:03:50. Please, I'm begging you. This is 3 hours before he kills her. 12:03:57. I ain't hurt like this. 12:04:01. Please just talk to me. This is from Mac's phone to Emma's. 12:04:04, please. 12:04:40, please. 12:06:06, please. 12:06:10, don't do this, I can't. 12:06:28, please.
A few hours later, Emma Walker was dead. Later, prosecutors say the defendant asked friends about getting rid of the gun, which they say he stole from his grandfather. Those friends went to police.
And so on November 22nd, he calls Alex again, and you'll see those texts. And Alex, he and Noah are going to throw away the gun in the Tennessee River because he can't be reasoned with that the gun can possibly exclude him. And the reason he can't be reasoned with is because he knows it's the murder weapon.
The defense admitted Riley Gaul pulled the trigger, but said it was another misguided stunt to scare the victim in the hopes she'd again turn to him for comfort.
Mr. Gaul committed the offense of reckless endangerment with the hope of coming to her rescue, of being her hero.
Gaul pleaded guilty to that reckless endangerment charge on the eve of trial, hoping the theory would stick and spare him from a life sentence. After opening statements, the victim's mother, father, and brother testified.
You would agree with me that she was secretive with you about her relationship with Riley?
Yes, because she knew that we didn't approve of it.
And when did that disapproval start?
In 2015, just when I saw she wasn't being treated properly, and then it just increased.
Okay.
The parents tried to keep the two apart.
And you're aware that Emma participated in him sneaking in as well, correct?
I am.
Okay. But it was part of the camera installation to maybe deter that or prevent it or catch it? Which one of the three or all three? I don't know.
I wanted to see if he was actually coming in my residence without my permission.
Okay.
The case, though, comes down to the two theories. Was this an intentional murder or a teenage football player committing lesser crimes in a bizarre attempt to hold on to his cheerleader girlfriend? This is Rachel Stockman for the Law and Crime Network.
That was Rachel Stockman reporting on the William Riley Gaul case. Again, this prominent college football player who was on trial for allegedly stalking and killing his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend Emma Walker. So I want to talk more about this case. I am looking right now, ladies and gentlemen, at the live feed. We are waiting to go live into that courtroom. Nothing has happened yet, but as soon as it starts, we'll make sure to go to it. Let's talk a little bit more about this case. With me right now on set is Law and Crime trial analyst Yosha Gunasekera. Yosha, good to see you.
It's good to be here.
Make sense for this. Make sense of this to me right now, because I'm confused. The defense is saying, okay, he staged a fake kidnapping 2 days before her shooting. He may or may not have dressed as this in an all-black outfit, walking around her neighborhood the day before her shooting. And then in the night of her shooting, he fires a gun, and this is all at her house, and this is all an attempt to get her attention and be her hero? Do I have that right?
You do. That is the defense's theory. And I think what's missing in all of this analysis is to remember at the time of the crime, this person was a kid. The defendant in this case was a child. He was 18 years old. And we have multiple studies that say that...
Is he a child? 18 years old?
His brain isn't fully developed, and I'm not trying to excuse anything that he did, but I'm just trying to provide a little bit more into what he could have been thinking. It is plausible that of the defense's theory that he's trying to win her back, that he's trying to play the hero, and that's what they're going with.
In other words, this is a lovesick kid. They broke up. They had a really tough relationship. He was heartbroken, but he was so overcome with emotion that he acted recklessly, that he didn't do the right thing? Is that the way that I should be understanding it? Because at the same point, Yosha, we learned yesterday from testimony from his closest friends that he tried to recruit them to get rid of some evidence and not be cooperative with police. How do you explain that?
So the defense has to have a theory here, and this is the strongest one that they've found. And what's important is in proving first-degree murder, there has to be some kind of premeditation, which essentially means he had to plan it ahead of time. So the things that he did after the fact, disposing the gun, that doesn't necessarily mean that he intentionally tried to kill her. Of course, it doesn't look good, but again...
No, it does not. No, it does not, Yosha.
It's a very tough case, and it's a tall order for his defense attorneys to be able to find a theory here, and this is what they've done. And one of the common strategies that defense attorneys do in cases like this, in cases that are very much an uphill battle, they concede certain facts, and that's exactly what the defense has done here. They've conceded that he had the gun, that he did try to shoot at the house, and that the house had people in it.
He pled guilty to reckless endangerment. So he's facing a minimum of 3 years in prison, right?
Exactly, and that plays very well into the defense strategy here, because the defense is then saying, look, he is going to jail. He's not completely blameless. We're not saying that he's innocent. He is going to be punished, but should he spend the rest of his life in jail? And they're saying no.
Well, we'll have to see. Again, we're going to continue our coverage later today, but in anticipation of that, I want to play you some of the testimony from Alex McCarthy. This is one of the defendant's best friends talking about what happened in this whole series of events. Take a look. This is testimony from yesterday. That's testimony from the William Riley Gaul case from yesterday, a case that we will be covering, a case that I'm carefully monitoring. I see the courtroom feed. It's out of Tennessee. It's about a former college football player who's on trial for allegedly stalking and killing his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker. That was the testimony of Alex McCarty, one of his good friends, talking about the events leading up to the shooting on that Sunday, late Sunday night, early Monday morning. Again, I'm here with Law and Crime trial analyst Yosha Gunasekera. What we learned from him, and I'm curious how this plays in, they had a lot of doubts about their friend. He saw that Riley Gaul had a gun, that he took the gun from his grandfather, that days later Emma died. First thought he had was, somehow my friend is involved in this. Also, this staged kidnapping plot that happened 2 days before. Remember, for anybody just joining us, the prosecution says that Riley Gaul staged a fake kidnapping to get the attention of Emma Walker, to lure her outside from a friend's house. So you're listening to that. How is that playing in for both the prosecution and also the defense?
Obviously, it's very beneficial for the prosecution. The prosecution really got a windfall with these secret tapes. Oftentimes, you don't get this type of evidence to be able to come in, or just to even have it available. And I think it proves, or helps prove, many of the things that he's been charged with. But again, does it prove that he's a premeditated killer? Now, looking back at a lot of the instances that he was, a man in black trying to scare her, staging his own kidnapping, again, they seem ridiculous, but then to escalate to murder does seem like quite the escalation in this case. It is conceivable that though he did shoot a gun at a house, he didn't anticipate the bullets actually penetrating the walls.
Well, he knew where she lived. He knew where her room was. He shot right there, could have shot anywhere. Now, again, for anybody who's joining us, you can go to lawandcrime.com. Our very own Aaron Keller wrote some very interesting articles about this piece, about this case. And one of the arguments he makes is, could have fired the gun anywhere. Could have fired the gun at the roof. Could have fired at the ground. But no, he shot at that room, and that's a fact that's going to be pretty hard for the defense. Yosha, we'll talk about it in a minute. We are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk more about the William Riley Gaul case. We are also going to talk about some other cases, one out of Florida, one out of Wisconsin. We're all across the country today, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber. Thanks for joining us. We have a busy day here. We're all across the country in different trials. I want to preview a case that's coming up today at 10:15 Eastern Standard Time. It's out of Florida. It's the Gloria Williams case. We are going to continue our coverage of this sentencing hearing. Williams posed as a nurse, stole a baby from a hospital, and raised that girl as her own daughter until it was ultimately discovered this was not so. That baby, who was born Kamaya Mobley, is now a 20-year-old young woman. Williams pled guilty to 2 charges, including kidnapping and interference with custody. Those are both felonies. The question today is, what punishment should she face? Williams is asking the court for no jail time. That's the minimum. She might not even get any jail time, or upwards of 22 years in prison for the kidnapping charge, plus an additional 5 years on the interference charge. Yesterday, as we talked about, Kamaya's biological mother, Shanara Mobley, took the stand, really provided some amazing testimony, and you heard the pain of having her baby taken away from her for 20 years. And when asked what she thought was an appropriate sentence for Miss Williams, she said, I'd sentence her to death. So you can pretty much see where she's coming. Now today, we believe Williams will take the stand herself. So we are going to cover that here on Law and Crime. You can watch it on lawandcrime.com, and you can also listen on SiriusXM, and I'm hoping all of our listeners are enjoying this right now. Let's bring in, again, Law and Crime trial analyst Yosha Gunasekera to talk about this. So if Williams takes the stand today, what do you anticipate some of her arguments are going to be? She pled guilty to kidnapping and interference with custody. Straightforward case? Maybe, maybe not.
So the sentencing hearing is all about what we would call mitigation evidence. It's why someone should be sentenced to less jail versus more. So I anticipate she's going to talk about why she committed this quite frankly horrific crime, why she did it, and she's likely going to talk about her life with Kamaya and the 18 years they had together, and hopefully garner some sympathy from the judge. Because
there's no abuse, there was no allegations of abuse, basically raised her as her own daughter. It seems that raised her as a great young woman. This is like a law school example. Someone committed a kidnapping but was a great mom. It's not like there was abuse or torture or rape or anything like that. So if you have this, why would she not get no jail time? Why would she not? It seems like she did. I mean, yes, she committed a crime, but...
Well, we definitely don't want to incentivize people and encourage them to steal babies out of the hospital and then raise them as their own.
Well said,
so
Yosha.
That's probably why there's going to be some jail. This is a case that's getting national coverage, and unfortunately, this is a common occurrence in hospitals today. They're essentially...
Are you serious? This is happening a lot?
Well, not as much recently, because maternity units have been very, very vigilant in ensuring that people are able to do this. I've had 2 sisters who both have 2 children each, and I've visited them in the hospital. It's very come close to a pat down. Because when I'm leaving, they want me to open my bag. They just want to make sure that this is not happening. But because it's really a heartbreaking crime. You're hearing Kamaya Mobley's biological parents talk about what happened, and it's devastating. I mean, they missed out on 18 years of their child's life.
So Shannara said that she would have a birthday cake every year for her, just in the hopes that Kamaya would come home one day. I mean, how sad is that? How sad do you get? And we can't forget that Williams posed as a nurse. She knew what she was doing, and she kept this baby for 18 years, 20 years. I mean, it's horrific. It's really sad. We're going to continue our coverage of that case, but that's not the only case that we're covering here on Law and Crime. We are also going to be covering the sentencing hearing, another sentencing hearing, in the George Birch case out of Wisconsin. We expect a live feed at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is a case that we have covered here on Law and Crime. George Birch was on trial for the 2016 murder of Nicole Vanderheiden. Prosecutors say that he violently beat, sexually assaulted, and strangled her with a cord. And despite all of this overwhelming evidence, his defense team said that he was innocent. They put him on the stand. They pointed the finger at Nicole's boyfriend. The jury didn't buy any of it. They found him guilty. Today becomes his sentencing hearing, and there has been multitudes of letters sent from family and friends of the victim saying that George Birch, he's automatically going to get a life in prison. But the question is, will he get the possibility of parole or not? Obviously, her family doesn't want any possibility of parole, while his defense team will present some arguments, as Yosha said, some mitigating factors to say that he should get the possibility of parole. We'll cover that case in a minute, but I want to now regain our focus on the main live trial of the day, or one of our main live trials of the day, the William Riley Gaul case out of Tennessee. We expect continued coverage in about 30 minutes or so at around 10 a.m. This is about William Riley Gaul, a former Maryville College football player who's on trial for allegedly stalking and killing his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker, who was a high school cheerleader at the time of her death. It's alleged that Gaul fired 2 shots through Walker's bedroom wall while she slept, and one of those shots struck her right in the head, killing her immediately. Now, he faces a number of different crimes, including stalking, so the events that occurred before the shooting, and it's alleged that he engaged in a fake kidnapping plot, stalked her house and then the day before, all in an attempt to get her, to stalk her. Really disturbing details in this case. Now, what we saw yesterday was equally interesting. We saw the testimony of Alex McCarty, who is one of the defendant's best friends. Well, I should have said former best friend, because many of some of the friends of the defendant, including Alex, decided to cooperate with police. And they engaged in, I would say, a sting operation. They recorded a conversation, a videotaped conversation, a secret conversation with Riley, where he talks about the shooting. And he talks and encourages them not to talk about the police. Here's some testimony from yesterday from Alex McCarty explaining a little bit more about this. Welcome back, everybody. We're covering the William Riley Gaul case out of Tennessee. We're waiting for a live feed in that courtroom. This is about that former Maryville College football player who's on trial for allegedly stalking and killing his ex-girlfriend, 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker, by shooting from outside her house 2 bullets. One bullet went right through the house and struck her right in the head while she was sleeping, right into her head. Really the sad case. Now, we're covering this case, but if you want to learn a little bit more about it, if you want to learn about more of the charges, you want to learn about what that witness was just talking about, that secret recording, you can go to lawandcrime.com. We have a bunch of articles discussing the breakdown of this case and different angles, both the prosecution's case, the defense's case. So go there. You'll check it out. Now, I want to talk more about this secret recording, this recording from his friends, Riley Gaul's friends, where he's implicating himself, and it's not looking so good. So again, I want to bring in Law and Crime trial analyst Yosha Gunasekera. How is this possible that there could be a secret recording? Riley didn't know about it.
So different states have different laws about wiretapping. Here, like in New York, there is a policy where as long as one person gives consent, one person knows about the recording, then it's totally fine. So here, Gaul's friend knew, obviously, he was working with the police, that there was a recording going on. And because of that, the surveillance, the tapping, it's all legal.
I mean, this is some pretty incriminating stuff. He's encouraging them, Yosha, not to talk to police and say, listen, if they come to you, just say, you know, you were drinking, you were high. This sounds like a calculated murder, not so much as a love-struck kid. But how would you flavor this?
It's bad, no doubt. And I think that's why you see the defense consenting to, not consenting, but just encouraging their client to plead guilty. And that's really rare. A lot of times in defense cases, people defense attorneys want to concede certain facts, but in this case, they're having him plead guilty before the trial even starts, which is very damaging because they're fully aware of these tapings and how bad they sound.
Firing a gun into a house, he's already pled guilty to that, but saying that he didn't intend to kill her, it really becomes a question of intent, doesn't it, Yosha?
It really does, and it's hard to, and the defense is going to argue it's very hard to get into the mind of someone that day. The prosecution's obviously going to say that's not the case. Look at everything that he's done that proves that he wants to harm her.
Let alone the mind of anybody, but let alone the mind of somebody who's allegedly made a fake kidnapping plot and walked around her neighborhood dressed in black. That was captured by surveillance footage. He was claiming he wasn't the man in black knocking on Emma Walker's door the day before the shooting, but this is a bizarre series of events, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to play you the testimony from Jill Walker. This is Emma's mom, and she discovered Emma right after the shooting. Now, it should be noted, she didn't know that Emma was shot at first. You're going to hear more about that after the short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody, and you picked a good day to join us because we are busy all throughout the country. We have trials all across the country today. We have one trial in Florida. Actually, I should say we have two sentencing hearings today. One out of Florida, one out of Wisconsin. Two convicted people. What will ultimately their punishment be? We're going to talk about those cases in a little bit. But right now, our main focus of the day is going to be the William Riley Gaul case out of Tennessee. This former college football star who is on trial for allegedly stalking and killing his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker. Really, really sad case, a young victim here. And what we played for you earlier in the day was the testimony from some of his friends, or at least one of his friends, who provided a secret audio tape video conversation where Riley Gaul admits to a lot of the crimes, or at least says try to cover it up. He doesn't quite admit to the crimes, but he does cover up. He says he wants his friends to not really speak to the police. So as the prosecution is building their case against this young man, one of the most compelling pieces of testimony was from Jill Walker. Now, this is the victim's mother. Jill Walker discovered her daughter's body. And again, what happened, according to the prosecution, is that William Riley Gaul allegedly fired 2 shots through Walker's bedroom wall while she slept, and one of those shots ultimately struck her in the head, killing her instantaneously. Now, Jill Walker didn't hear the gunshots at first, but when she went to check up on Emma, she didn't know quite what to expect, and she didn't know that she was shot at first. Here's some testimony from earlier in the week. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the testimony of Jill Walker, the mother of Emma Walker, this 16-year-old girl that was shot in the head. Now, we're talking about this because we're talking about the William Riley Gaul case, the man who's on trial for her murder. And it is alleged that he fired 2 shots through her bedroom wall. One of those shots ultimately hitting her right in the head, killing her instantaneously. Now, the question became, what was his intent? Was this murder? Was this an accident? Was this reckless? That becomes the question. But listening to Jill Walker, the victim's mother, explaining finding her dead daughter and not even realizing that this was a gunshot at first, how chilling is that? Unbelievable. We are going to continue our coverage of the William Riley Gaul case. We're expecting a live feed at the 10 a.m. hour. As soon as we have it, we'll make sure to go right into the courtroom. I'm looking at the trial feed, so as soon as we have it, we'll make sure to go into it. But before we do, I want to preview another case that we're covering today. It's the George Birch case out of Wisconsin. It's a case we've covered before. George Birch was found guilty in connection with the 2016 murder of Nicole Vanderheiden, and today is his sentencing hearing. What will he be sentenced to? Now, that conviction automatically triggers a life sentence, a life in prison sentence, but will he be granted the possibility of parole or not? So I want to talk about this more with Law and Crime trial analyst Yosha Gunasekera. What is the judge going to listen to? I know the judge received many letters from the family and friends of the victim saying this guy should not have the possibility of parole, but what does that analysis look like?
I mean, the letters are obviously going to be a huge factor. The judge is going to rely heavily on friends and family and how their life has been completely changed. And then it's also important to remember the children involved here. The victim here in this case had children, and that's going to weigh heavily on the judge's mind. But what's really, I think, also going to play into this whole analysis is that George Birch testified in this trial. He testified and he told a very unbelievable tale. And oftentimes you find judges actually using that against criminal defendants.
Let's summarize that for a second. So he said in his defense that he wasn't the murderer, that it was Douglas Dietrich, Nicole's boyfriend, who did this, and came up with a story that Douglas knocked him out because George was having sex with Nicole in the car outside of her house. Douglas came by, knocked him over the head with a gun, pointed the gun at him. When he woke up, she was dead, forced him to get rid of the body. So, I mean, I'm saying this, it sounds like an unbelievable story. So you're saying the judge will look at him and say, sir, you tried to make a mockery of this courtroom and the jurors? Is that something how they would say it?
Well, he got on the stand and was convicted, and so therefore he lied. He was a liar, and I think that weighs heavily. I mean, his story is the plot of a Hollywood movie.
It really is. We can't make this stuff up here on Law and Crime. And again, you are watching Law and Crime. We cover all different kinds of cases. We are going to take a break in a minute, but I want to let you know that when we come back, we're going to talk about the George Birch case. We're going to talk about the William Riley Gaul case. We are also going to talk about the Gloria Williams case out of Florida, this woman who pled guilty to kidnapping a baby hours after she was born, and now it becomes her sentencing hearing. What will happen to her? We'll take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute. Stay tuned. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome back to Law and Crime, where we cover some of the most interesting live trials in the country today. I'm very happy that you're all joining us, but I also want to provide a very special welcome to all of our listeners on Sirius XM Radio. I hope all of you are enjoying the program. We have a lot to talk about today. We are in cases, we are in courtrooms across the country. So let's start with the main one for today. We are live in 3. First up in Florida, we're going to be live in the sentencing hearing of Gloria Williams. This is a woman who posed as a nurse, stole a baby from a hospital, raised the girl as her own until it was ultimately discovered what the truth was. That baby, who was born Kamaya Mobley, is now a 20-year-old young woman. So Williams pled guilty to 2 of the charges, kidnapping and interference with custody. These are both felonies. The question becomes, what will her sentence be? And this is the second day today in her sentencing hearing. She could face anywhere from no jail time to 22 years in prison on the kidnapping charge and 5 years in prison on the interference charge. The interesting aspect of this case is, and what makes this different from other kinds of kidnapping cases, is there doesn't appear to be any abuse. It appears that she raised a really great young woman and raised her as her own. But at the end of the day, this is still a crime, and we saw the testimony from Shanara Mobley, Kamaya's biological mother, yesterday, and she was in tears, she was extremely emotional, and she believes that Williams should be sentenced to death. Obviously, that's not on the table, but you get a good idea about where she's coming from. We are going to continue our coverage of that today, and we believe Williams, the defendant herself, will take the stand and say why she believes she doesn't deserve the maximum sentence. That is one case we're covering here on Law and Crime. The other case that we're covering is at around 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is the George Birch case out of Wisconsin. A case that we did cover here on Law and Crime. George Birch was on trial for the 2016 murder of Nicole Vanderheiden. Prosecutors did say that Birch violently beat, sexually assaulted, and strangled Vanderheiden with a cord. Despite overwhelming evidence against him, both forensic and eyewitness, his defense team said that he didn't do it, that it was Douglas Dietrich, Nicole Vanderheiden's boyfriend, that he was the actual killer. George Birch took the stand himself to say that. Didn't really work out so well. The jury found him guilty. Today becomes his sentencing hearing, and what will happen to him? He automatically will get life in prison. That's a done deal. We know that. But will he get the possibility of parole? Will he be granted that or not? That becomes the question. We'll talk about more of that case in a little bit. I do want to let our viewers know that there are 2 other cases that we're following. If you go to lawandcrime.com, we're not going to cover it here on the network, but if you go to lawandcrime.com, we are going to cover the David Copperfield case out of Las Vegas. The famed magician is being sued by an audience participant who allegedly got injured during one of these tricks. The MGM Grand, who housed this whole performance, is also being sued. That's an interesting civil case we've been following as well, including when David Copperfield took the stand himself. It's a case that you might want to follow. You can go to lawandcrime.com to check that one out. Also want to let our viewers know that on Monday we are going to continue our coverage of the Sean Great case out of Ohio. It has been on break. It'll be back Monday. This is that accused serial killer who has a 23-count indictment facing a multitude of charges. But really the main crux of the argument is that he murdered 2 women and kidnapped and raped a third. Earlier this week, he pled guilty to 15 of the 23 charges. You heard me? 15 of the 23 charges. But the murder charges are still on the table, and that carries with it a potential death penalty sentence. We'll cover more of that case on Monday. But now I want to focus on another main case, our main trial of the day, our live feed. I'm looking at the live feed right now. It's the William Riley Gaul case out of Tennessee. This is that former Maryville College football player who was on trial for allegedly stalking and killing his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker. It's alleged that he fired 2 shots through her bedroom wall while she slept, and that one of those shots ultimately killed her, struck her right in the head. And this is an interesting case because he's already pled guilty to one of the charges in the indictment, and that charge was reckless endangerment. That carries with it anywhere from 3 to 15 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. But remember, he is on trial for first-degree murder and also this thing called killing during aggravated child abuse. Well, what does that mean? Let's talk about it a little bit more with Yosha Gunasekera, who's joining me on set, our law and crime trial analyst. Yosha, William Riley Gaul, this young kid, he's on trial. What is killing during aggravated child abuse? I know what murder is. What's that?
So it's part of the felony murder statute. So essentially, when you are committing a violent felony, if you happen to kill someone, whether intentional or not, you could be convicted under this felony murder statute. And so that's what we're looking at here now. Because remember, the victim was 16 years old, and if he is found guilty of any violent felony, he can still be found guilty under the felony murder without being found guilty of the first-degree murder.
In other words, that's a loophole. If they can't say, hey, you intentionally killed her, well, you engaged in child abuse, my friend. You caused a serious injury here, and as a result of that behavior, she died. Now, we've covered other cases before where attorneys are not happy about the felony murder rule. Defense attorneys are not happy with the felony murder rule because doesn't it give the prosecution a loophole to get their client?
Yes, it definitely does. It's a way where you can impose a really stiff sentence on someone, up to life in prison in some states, when someone didn't actually have the intent to commit murder, which is alarming. It's shocking. So while it's terrible to commit any violent felony, many times if you're doing that and you don't have the intent to kill someone, but that's the unfortunate result, then you're still being convicted of that murder charge.
It's strange to say because you're not talking about a parent. You're talking about an 18-year-old boyfriend, 16-year-old girl. It's child abuse. I mean, he is an adult. And we talked about earlier in the last hour how, is he an adult? Is his brain formed? You know, but he's an adult under the law. So It becomes an interesting scenario. Now, the William Riley Gaul case, this college football player who's on trial for murdering his ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker, he doesn't just face the murder charge. He also faces a stalking charge, a theft of property charge, and hiding a gun charge, as well as employing a firearm during a dangerous felony charge. So this gun that was allegedly used to shoot Emma Walker became a real big issue in this case earlier in the week because this gun allegedly came from the defendant's grandfather. That's right. The prosecution is saying that William Riley Gaul stole this gun from his grandfather in an effort to hatch this murder plot. Now, what I want to do for you right now is play you some of the testimony from James Walker. This is the defendant's grandfather. And I want you to listen carefully because this is not just any witness. This is a family member. This is somebody who loves the defendant. And he has to testify against him. Take a look. Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. We're in a lot of different courtrooms today, or we will be. We're waiting for the live feed in one in particular right now, the William Riley Gaul case out of Tennessee. This former college football player who's on trial for allegedly stalking and killing his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker. It's alleged that he fired 2 shots through her bedroom wall, and one of those shots ultimately hit her right in the head, killing her immediately. Now, he faces a lot of different charges. One of them is a stalking charge. And I want to talk a little bit more about that with Law and Crime trial analyst Yosha Gunasekera, who's here with me on set. The stalking charge, how does that play into this case? I mean, so they're saying that he created a fake kidnapping plot on Friday night before the shooting. Saturday, he was walking around dressed all in black, outside of her house, banging on her house. Is that stalking?
Yes, it is stalking. Stalking is anything that is harassment that causes a reasonable person to feel scared or alarmed, and we're meeting those basic tenets here.
So it matters what she's feeling, Emma Walker, the victim.
Yes.
And she seems scared, right?
And she seemed very scared. And I think just even hearing the mother's testimony, so we heard the mother testify that they were following her to and from work. They were following their daughter, not because they didn't trust her, but because they were scared for her, because they were worried that something was going to happen to her. So I think that reflects her state of mind, Emma's state of mind, that she was really scared.
And what is the defense saying? They're saying this isn't stalking. This is somebody they had an on-again, off-again relationship?
Yeah, I think they're going to try to paint it as just 2 young people who are having a troubled relationship that is unconventional.
But isn't that possible what it is? Isn't it possible what it is? It's not stalking? Didn't she ask for him to come to the house at one point?
And so that they're going to capitalize on that. They're going to capitalize on the fact that Emma continued to reach out to him. She continued to text him. They continued to have an open channel of communication. And would she really speak with someone? Would she have someone in her life if she was really fearful of them? So that's what the defense is going to argue.
But can you have a stalker that you're in contact with?
Oh, definitely.
You can.
You definitely can. It's at the moment in time, at that moment in time, at a singular moment in time, was he harassing her, and did she feel scared? Did she feel threatened? You can have oftentimes this is the stalking situation that we see. We see situations where people are in a relationship, they are communicating, and then someone takes something too far. So it's totally conceivable that he could still be found guilty.
We're trying to explain this situation and how all this happened, and it's really not for us to ultimately explain. It's up to the attorneys, and it's up to the jury eventually to figure out, are they going to convict this young man or not? What I want to play for you right now is testimony from yesterday. This is one of Riley Gaul's teammates, okay? He's an upperclassman. He testifies to a lot of different things, including about Riley Gaul giving his phone to Riley Gaul the night before Emma Walker died. And he also talks about whether or not the defendant was suicidal, and a little bit more about that. Let's listen to more of that testimony from yesterday. That's the testimony of McMillian Siegel, who was the defendant's teammate in the William Riley Gaul case. Again, William Riley Gaul was a former college football player who's on trial now for allegedly stalking and killing his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker. And what you're learning from this witness is a little bit more about the behavior of William Riley Gaul during this series of events. And interesting enough, you keep hearing this conversation about his mental, is he suicidal? What's going on with this man? So let's talk a little bit more about it. And again, we are waiting for a live feed in that case. I'm looking at the courtroom feed. I actually do see William Riley Gaul in the courtroom, but nothing's happening yet. As soon as the trial begins back up today, we'll make sure to go into that courtroom. But I want to bring back in Yosha Gunasekera. Yosha, okay, so everybody who's just watching us, right, okay, so everybody's standing up in the courtroom. William Riley Gaul is there. It appears the jury's coming in. I want to ask you a quick question, Yosha, in case we have time. The suicidal nature of this, you mentioned it in the break. He seems to be mentally unstable. How come the defense didn't go that way?
I think it would have been a stronger defense for them to really explore his mental health issues. Obviously, someone who is faking their own kidnapping, even at the age of 18, other 18-year-olds are not doing this. So I think that might have been a mistake on the defense's part. Obviously, they thought they had a stronger argument just saying he was in love with her and that this was not a premeditated murder.
And that's can be called, love is such a reason for these kinds of crimes, right? It's money, jealousy, but love is a big motivator, isn't it?
Yes, love or the lack of it. You really see these type of murders take place when relationships are crumbling, when the person feels like they absolutely cannot live without the person. They're not thinking properly. They're doing some very drastic actions, as we see here.
I mean, look at the text messages. The text messages he sent to Emma right before the shooting. I think it was like 64 messages begging her, pleading with her, don't do this, don't do this. I don't think he realized that it would be in a court of law, jurors looking at it, the world looking at it, all of our viewers and listeners on Law and Crime seeing all of this. But this is evidence of a person that didn't have his full capacities about him, right?
Yes, and it just goes to show how quickly these things escalate. I've talked to people on both sides, people who have been in these situations, clients that I have represented, and oftentimes they don't want it to get to the point that it got to, but there's a burst of anger, there's a split-second decision that's causes these things.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to be live right now in the William Riley Gaul case out of Tennessee. A witness is on the stand. Again, this is a former college football player who is on trial for allegedly stalking and killing his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend. Let's listen in live. All of our viewers, you're actually looking at a live feed into the courtroom and you see the defendant. This is a young kid. Yosha, what do you think's going on in his mind? Do you think there's a sense of regret? Do you think there's a sense of worry? Do you think that there's a sense of, I can't believe I'm here? Is there anger? What is going on, do you think, in the mind of the defendant right now?
It's always hard to tell, but I can imagine he's probably very, very scared. He knows he is in a lot of trouble and facing, the rest of his life behind bars, and you would hope that he would feel some regret. I think hearing the victim's mother talk, Emma's mother talk, is just so heartbreaking. The side quip that she said, she loved her hair, she wanted to get up early to wash her hair. It's heartbreaking, and you hope that is causing some remorse for him.
Yosha, the mother didn't realize her daughter was dead, and she didn't even realize that she was shot. What they thought was vomit at first, it really was. And I'm sorry to say this, ladies and gentlemen, it was fragments from her brain. It was blood because she was shot in the head. So imagine out there that you go in and your child, I don't even know how to explain this. This is what they're looking at right there. And she has to go into a courtroom and testify about it.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. And I think what would scare parents or anyone really is that they were unable to keep their child safe in their home. I mean, they were worried about her on the outside, following her to and from work, to and from school, but then inside the four walls of their own home, she was killed.
That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching and listening to the William Riley Gaul case, but another case that we are going to be covering shortly, we plan to do at least, is out of Florida. It's the Gloria Williams sentencing hearing. Williams posed as a nurse, stole a baby from a hospital, and raised the girl as her own until it was discovered that this was not so. That baby was born Kamaya Mobley. She's now a 20-year-old young woman. Williams pled guilty to 2 charges, kidnapping and interference with custody. So she's already guilty. What is happening today is the sentencing phase. What will her punishment be? And under Florida law for these charges, she could face no prison time or anywhere up to 22 years in prison for the kidnapping charge and 5 years on the interference charge. We saw yesterday the testimony of Shanara Mobley, who is this young girl's biological mother, talking about the pain that she went through for these past 20 years. Williams, we believe, will get on the stand today in her own defense, talking about what her motivations were. Again, I'm here with Yosha Gunasekera. So that idea, Williams getting on the stand, how does she explain this away? Look, I was in a dark place in my life, but she didn't make a mistake and then give the baby back an hour later. She kept her.
Yeah, she did, and it was a terrible crime. It is a terrible crime, and I think the judge is going to want to hear from her why she did this, why she was compelled to intentionally take a baby out of the hospital. It wasn't a split-second decision. She dressed up as a nurse with the intention of taking a baby, but I think she can get sympathy to her cause, if she's able to explain where she was at that point in her life and the joy that her daughter Kamaya has brought her and the relationship that they now share today, I think that that's going to be very compelling, especially since it seems that Kamaya herself will not be testifying.
Interesting, because we thought Kamaya, this young girl, the victim in this whole case, we thought she was going to provide some testimony, but that is not the case anymore. We thought that she was going to, but she's not. Not sure what happened. We can speculate about why that might be, but she's not going to provide testimony. And all accounts were that she was going to speak on behalf of Miss Williams. The defendants say she was a great mom. She raised me well, which is such a bizarre case because you have the victim would be testifying for the defendant, but that didn't happen. What do you think happened?
It's hard to say, and it's really unfortunate because I think Kamaya's testimony would have been the strongest piece of this entire hearing, and I think the judge hearing from Kamaya herself that her mother was wonderful would have really helped her mother out, but it could be a variety of reasons.
Mother in quotation marks. That's
yes.
really the way to explain it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have a lot of different cases to talk about, including the Gloria Williams case and the William Riley Gaul case. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to Law and Crime, ladies and gentlemen. We are live right now in two courtrooms in the country. We're live in Florida and we're live in Tennessee. As you know, we've been covering the William Riley Gaul case out of Tennessee, that former college football player who's on trial for allegedly stalking and killing his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker. But we are also live right now. You see that feed? We're live in the Gloria Williams case out of Florida. That woman, she just took the stand. She's about to talk. She's about to testify. She pled guilty to kidnapping a baby, taking her from a hospital, and raising her as her own daughter for the last 20 years. Now is her sentencing hearing. What punishment will she face? Let's go live and listen in. Welcome back, everybody. You're watching and you're listening to Law and Crime. We are in the Gloria Williams sentencing hearing out of Florida. The woman that you're listening to right now is the defendant. She is the person who pled guilty to kidnapping a baby from a hospital, taking that baby home, raising her as her own daughter for 20 years. This young lady is born Kamaya Mobley. She's now a 20-year-old girl. So this woman, Miss Williams, is already pled guilty. This is her sentencing phase. What will her punishment be? She could face anywhere from no prison time to anywhere up to 22 years in prison on the kidnapping charge and 5 years in prison on the interference with custody charge, which she pled guilty to as well. What we're learning right now is her upbringing. Where was she born? What was she like? Where does she come from? This is what we're learning right now. So I want to bring in right now Yosha Gunasekera. We're listening to this. It's important for the judge to hear this, right? Trying to understand where she came from. She seems like a normal upbringing, tried to get educated, family. Yes, she got divorced, but she has kids. Where does this flip?
So that's what I would be interested in continuing to watch and see. Did she perhaps lose a child, and is that why she did it? Was there some event in her life that was so drastic, so horrible, that just made her do something that she wouldn't normally do? Because she does seem like a very sympathetic, normal woman.
Yes, but at the end of the day, does that matter? Because really, isn't it just focused upon the crime? I mean, she committed a crime, but the why is important, right?
The why is important, and that's why we have sentencing hearings full of mitigation evidence, because the reasons why people do what they do are important. And I think in this case, she's going to get some jail time. It's just going to be a matter of how much.
Well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. We're going to switch gears right now. We want to go back to Tennessee. We're in the William Riley Gaul case. This former college football player, college star, who was on trial for allegedly stalking and killing his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker. It's alleged that he fired 2 shots through her bedroom wall. One of those shots hit her right in the head, killing her immediately. We have right now on the stand one of his teammates. Let's listen in live. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening and watching to the live feed in the William Riley Gaul case out of Tennessee. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to go back into the courtroom, talk more about it. I do have to sign off my guest, though, Yosha Gunasekera, who was great this morning. Thank you so much for joining us, Yosha.
It's great to be here.
All right. When we come back, we're going to learn a little bit more about this case. And there's a lot at stake for everyone involved, including this young defendant. We'll be back in a minute. Stay tuned.